Hello and welcome into my channel. My name is Sarah. I'm a mindset mastery coach, transformational hypnotherapist, and attachment style specialist. In today's video, we're talking about the dismissive avoidant and the power games that they play inside of a relationship. You'll want to stay tuned to the end because I'm going to give examples from my own marriage as well as talk about how to beat them at their own game. So let's start at the beginning. But first, if you'd like a personal session with me, there's a link to click below for a free 15-minute discovery call, and you can do that anytime you'd like. And also stay tuned for the month of June because I have some exciting announcements and projects that I'm working on behind the scenes, including a live course as well as an online course that you can complete at your own pace, at your own level, in the comfort of your own home. So stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to receive all updates. And let's get started. So at the beginning of a relationship, and I have several videos talking about this already, but I just want to go over it again for anybody who might be new to the channel. A dismissive avoidant will often be the one to sweep you off your feet. They come in hot and heavy, like the knight in shining armor, or like the princess that you've always dreamed of, and they will literally sweep you off your feet. You will feel like you hung the stars and the moon for this person. They will put you on a pedestal and stay like forewarned, you will fall off of that pedestal. You will come crashing down at a later point in time when you reveal your humanity, when you reveal that you're flawed, and when you reveal that you have needs to this person. But they're going to know exactly how to hook you, especially at the beginning, and especially if you're an anxious attacher. If you identify or you know that you're an anxious attacher and you have those wounds of abandonment and rejection, then this person you're going to flock to each other like a moth to a flame. And I'm going to talk about that, more of the science of that, in a separate video because it's really fascinating, and you'll want to stay tuned for that as well. And I'll be doing that probably later today or tomorrow. So stay tuned for that video. And once they know that you're hooked, right? They've got you hooked. They've done all the romantic things. They're likely showing up passionately, even intimately in the beginning of the relationship. That's when the games will truly begin. And I can't give a time frame for this because it'll look different. A lot of times a dismissive avoidant will rush into a relationship. And now if you're a secure attacher, you know that this is a red flag. But if you're anxious attacher, or you have any attachment wounds or any insecure attachment, this is probably going to feel a lot like home. I'm going to talk about that more in detail later. A lot of my clients say to me, this person felt like home. And in fact, I felt the same way in my marriage. And I want to tell you why, because it is not about that person. It feels like it. I understand. It feels to the core of your being. You feel like this is the person. This is my home. It's not. It's about an attachment wound that you have, which should be exciting and empowering for you because now you know you can free yourself from the grip of your dismissive avoidant ex. So an anxious attacher can't always spot the games that the dismissive avoidant is playing because the anxious attacher, this is your blind spot. Remember, our nervous systems are seeking out our partners, and in doing so, that's why we have the anxious avoidant trap. It's this anxious avoidant magnetic connection to each other because you both have what the other person is lacking. And in the beginning, it's really exciting for an anxious attacher because you're attracted to the coolness and the togetherness, if you will, of the dismissive avoidant attacher because they seem so cool, calm, and collected. And it's the opposite of how you typically respond to life and to relationships. And vice versa. The avoidant is attracted to your intensity. They're attracted to your passion, your zest for life, for them, your passion. And so you're both giving each other what you feel like you lack inside. The truth is, you don't lack that. It's just a wound inside of you that needs to be healed. You think the other person can heal it, but they can't. It was never about that person. This is the good news, is it was always about you. So an avoidant will, I want to state this, both unconsciously from core wounds and from fear, and consciously sometimes manipulate by doing certain things like evading personal questions. Definitely not being able to answer questions about what happened in your previous relationship. Why did that end and what was your role? They may keep you waiting for a long time. They may keep you on read receipt, with text, or they may not call you back right away, or they may be kind of playing the field and you're not sure where you stand with this individual. They're going to manipulate, the relationship dynamics in some way that kind of keeps you off center a little bit. This is all about control, which I'll get to in a minute. They may also withhold love, sex, and affection. and even their time. And so in doing so, you may feel like I'm just not a priority to this person, or this person really isn't that into me. And for an anxious attacher, there's a part of you that almost craves this because your nervous system thinks that this is normal. This is what it's been used to. This is home for your nervous system. But there's also a part of you that's like, hey, this is scary for me. And this can send you into a downward spiral or even a panic attack for a true anxious attacher. The DA may also purposefully say or do something to kind of throw you off balance and cause a certain response or effect in you. And this is kind of hard to pinpoint. I was trying to think of examples for this. They may do something like, and I've talked about this in other videos as well, where you may say something or ask a question, and they may start answering and then trail off mid sentence. And then you're left just going, this was a bid for connection. You ask them a question that's called a bid for connection. And then they're just answering, and then they stop. And then you go, well, hey, what were you saying? And then they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't remember. And so it disconnects, they're disconnecting from the conversation and from you in that moment. And maybe because their nervous system became overloaded or overwhelmed, or maybe because they're trying to simply control the connection in the situation. It can be one or other, or even a little of both. If you're an anxious attacher, like I said, this uncertainty can feel like home for you. I can't tell you how many clients come to me saying, this person was home. This is it. I just want to be with this person. It's never been about this person, but you think it's about this person. Your nervous system remembers this feeling from childhood, this pain, this feeling, um, this uncertainty. It remembers this from one of your parents or one of your caretakers. If it wasn't a parent, it was whoever took care of you, whoever was around the most, whether that's a nanny or a grandparent or an aunt, an uncle, a foster parent. But it remembers what that felt like to have love and then have it taken away. It's that intermittent reinforcement that a DA gives you that your parent or caretaker also gave you. So you'll feel like it's love. You'll feel the intensity of falling in love, but really that intensity is a fear of this person going away, not knowing when they're going to return your calls or texts, not knowing where you stand, and not knowing really what your place is in this person's life. It's really your nervous system seeking out that familiar pain. It's not about the DA. It's never been about them. I can't, like, I want to sing this from the rooftops. This is your freedom. This is your opportunity here. Take this, rewind it, listen to this video again and again to get that understanding that it was never about this person. You get to empower yourself now. Take your power back, call your power back, and understand that your power lies in your hands. This person was simply a mirror to your wounds. This person was a teacher. And if you can acknowledge them as that, just step back and start calling them my teacher instead of my ex, or even by their first name, this is going to help you in your healing process. You're desperately trying to get your needs met from a person who can't meet your needs, just like in childhood. Now, what you don't understand, but I'm going to explain to you, is that that person who can meet your needs is you. You are the one that you've been looking for. I know you've probably heard that in different spiritual rooms or elements, like you're the one you've been looking for, but it's true. You are truly the one that you've been seeking. And when you can really, truly get that understanding, your life is going to change dynamically. So you're trying to get your needs met from yet another unavailable person, just like your parent. I want you to really think back on this. And this is where the true work comes in, because a lot of people find it very difficult, myself included, to sort of like, you don't want to villainize your parent. So you feel like, well, if I throw my parent under the bus, then what does that mean about my childhood? What does that say about my parent that I love? What does that say about my future relationship with them? Well, it means there's going to be some work to do to repair that within yourself. But it also means that this is an opportunity to meet your inner child and become your own inner parent. And you can erase the voice of the inner critic, AKA the inner parent, and you can replace it with your own loving voice and become your own loving parent. Now, I'm going to give some examples here. What are some ways in which going back to the DA and how they may manipulate consciously or unconsciously the relationship and how they can maintain that sense of control? There could be silent, subtle cues like ignoring a bid for connection, walking ahead of you, trailing off mid-sentence, being on their phones a lot, or just in some way, refusing time, energy, love. But it might not be something you can pinpoint because it'll be so subtle, and they're very good at that. And then it can be overt games, which can actually be cruel. So I'm going to give an example. Um, I got disinvited to my ex husband's high school reunion. He invited me, wanted me there, and suddenly things had taken a downturn in our relationship and our marriage, but I was still fighting for it. I realize now that he was fighting to get out of it because of his nervous system. And so I got disinvited. So he went with his cousin and best friend who lived in the same little town as us, and I got to stay home that night. And he came home whenever the hell he wanted, which was about 2 or 3 in the morning. I don't really know what happened. And I don't know if he wore his ring. I have no idea how he behaved, but it definitely made me feel very uneasy. It brought a lot of anxiety to me. And now I see that that was totally warranted. That was a fucked up move, and it shouldn't have happened like that. So that's an example of, and that's pretty overt. Like that was done to hurt me. He claims it was done because he wanted to just, have a drama free night. No, that was done, definitely done to hurt me, especially when I explained how it made me feel. I explained in detail how that made me feel. I'm going to give a second example. Actually, I'm going to give 3 examples. So I'll give the second one here. This is really subtle. This is one of those subtle things. He changed his phone wallpaper from a picture of us in our wedding to a picture of his son, which, okay, fine. But he would do it after arguments and then lie to me and tell me that I don't know how that happened. My phone did that. Finally, I got him to admit that he did it. And he was almost like I was talking to the little boy in him. He was very ashamed. I'm very ashamed that I lied. Why would you lie? So I found that he was doing these subtle little white lies. And it was really to cover his butt, right? In situations like this. So that was enough. It hurt my feelings. And I think that was the intention, was to hurt my feelings and to show me like, look, you're not that important to me now. So that's example number 2. Example number 3, this is gonna hit home for some of you. And I may have not shared this part of my story yet on the channel. This is the first example, or the first time that I experienced his rage and his eruptive rage and anger. So I had moved out to this small town in California about a month prior. And then we went back to Florida to get my 3 kitties, and we moved them to California. Now it was like a 13-hour day of traveling, airports, waiting with kitties, and then, driving from the airport to home. So it was a long day. We were stressed. We were newlyweds. We were exhausted. And this was after my move, and my dependency on him was cemented at this point. I was financially dependent on him. I had chronic illness and fatigue at that point. I've since recovered from that, but it was debilitating. And I had been really transparent about this from the beginning. When he met me, he took it all on. He said, I want to help you get strong. I want to help you get healed, et cetera, et cetera. Now I see that as a power move and as somebody trying to save somebody else. And that was a huge red flag, because nobody can save us. And nobody is coming to save us but us. So this is when he displayed his anger for the first time. And it was simply because I asked him if he was going to stop at this gas station along the way on the way home, and I got screamed at. And then he slept in his office that night, the first night my kitties were there, when really they needed comfort, they needed routine, they needed both of us, and they needed to feel safe. So it was me and my kitties alone in this house. I'd only been there for a month. And keep in mind, I'm in an isolated desert town out in the middle of literally nowhere, like an hour and a half away from real civilization. And I've been taken out of my comfort zone, out of my beautiful city that I lived in, that I loved, and my life and my just routine, my everything that was comfortable to me, creature comforts. There was nothing in this town that was taken away. I had no friends there, only his family. So he took that opportunity and seized it and became extremely controlling from that point forward. Now, he would probably tell you a different story. I think some of it was unconscious for sure from core wounds, and some of it was deliberate. Now, it's that deliberate control that you really need to watch out for. So a DA will always seek to assert control or have control. Why control? Because it's a core wound from childhood. Their needs were not met. They feel defective, never enough. Their needs were flat out ignored and rejected. And they were even told, if they weren't told outright, then their parents' actions spoke to them and told them that your needs are a nuisance. And so the DA learns that not having their needs met is just normal. So therefore, if their needs aren't met and they get used to that and push them down, how do you expect them to deal with your needs? They don't know how to even deal with their own. So the irony in all of this is that they hate being controlled, and yet that's exactly what they'll do to you. They'll demand control, and they'll do to you what they fear happening to them most, which is losing control, losing their identity, losing their autonomy. And really, they fear sort of engulfment by another, which is interesting because they pair up with anxious attachers typically who will engulf them. And anxious attachers, you have your own work to do. Okay. You've got you've got wounds that are gaping and they need to be addressed of abandonment and rejection and thinking that another person can save you. So they're, in codependency, an anxious attacher is codependent and also emotionally unavailable themselves. So anxious attachers have their work to do as well. But losing control is a threat to the DA. It's a threat to their distorted sense of self. It's a threat to this mechanism they've built, inside of them, like this perfectly oiled machine of how they respond to life and how they show up in relationships and who they allow in and how much they allow in. And it's a threat to that when they lose control. It overwhelms their very delicate nervous system, and they'll look for any escape, including leaving a loving partner. The DA really isn't that difficult to figure out. What you want to figure out is, are you with an ethical DA or an unethical one? Are they cruel? Are they displaying very manipulative, distorted behaviors? Or are they more conscious? Are they aware? Can they self-reflect? Because then they can heal. Then you can have a conversation and start the healing process potentially together. But if they're a true, unaware, unhealed DA, you got to run. You're going to be disappointed over and over again. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about the one way in which you can beat them at their own game. But I'll give you a little preview here. You can beat them at their own game by being the one to walk away. Even if they break up with you, be the one to walk away, because the truth is a DA always thinks that they can come back. They always think that that door will be left open. And that's really when they almost think of like a breakup, like a test. And they're like, well, I'll just come back when I'm less activated, when I'm deactivated, and when I have space and I can feel that expansiveness and space inside of me, then I'll just get them back. But it's a losing game. So how you can beat them at their own game, don't go no contact to get them back, because you're just going to repeat the same cycle. Go no contact to heal yourself. Learn about inner child work, learn about internal family systems, and understand, and parts work, and understand that your role in this is to heal yourself, that this person was a teacher and a mirror. And if you really, really are honest with yourself, you'll find that this person represents the parent that you had the most issues with in childhood. So I'm going to end that there, guys. Look out for the future videos that I talked about. Take really good care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.